Everyone doing? Is everyone awake? I know a lot of you have been here all morning, and it's awesome to see you all. I've got my recording started, and it is 12:15, so I'm going to go ahead and start on this little party. So today's talk topic for me is basically a buffet. It's a taste tester of a bunch of different things in ColdFusion, some of it very, very basic for folks that are new to ColdFusion, maybe interested in seeing what it's capable of doing, maybe trying to compare it to how other languages do stuff, as well as maybe some other things that are just kind of like cool and fun. You might see things that you've never seen before. You might see things that you never realized you could use in a particular way. And hopefully all of you will walk out of here today with at least one thing that you can take back to work or your own projects, or just say, hey, I learned something today. Hopefully. If not, I don't know, I'll buy you a beer in Vegas. So just a quick heads up. So we continue to have talks every day the rest of this week. I will be hosting the talks tomorrow. Apurva will be hosting the talks on Thursday and Friday. So make sure that you continue to show up. The talks get maybe a little more advanced and a little fancier as we get further and further in the week. That's kind of how we try to set them up. So there's going to be some really fun stuff later in the week, so don't miss it. Apologies about the registrations and links not coming in. You can use the links that you used to get in here today to get in tomorrow. It should still be fine. The schedule is online. And you know, the speakers are online and all of that too. So anyway, I'm going to get started. So today, top 10 Adobe ColdFusion. They're more like tips than tricks, really. I don't want to say that they're necessarily that they're tricks. But what are we going to talk about? So first, I'm going to do a little intro. Most of you know me. Some of you don't, but after today, you will. And then we're going to get into the meat of this. I've got code samples. All of this code will be available on a GitHub. So you'll be able to check that out. I'll push it later this afternoon. So you'll be able to play with it, use it in your own stuff, whatever you want to do. Again, hopefully you'll find something useful. Hopefully we'll have time for Q&A. Honestly, the last time I practiced this, it was over an hour. So you might have to email me your questions, unfortunately, because I do have a bit of a hard stop after about an hour 10. So anyhow, let's just jump right into it. Right, who am I? Who's this guy that's on your screen with missing hair? JC asks, any beer? Maybe. We'll talk, buddy. In Vegas, you never know. There might be some crazy beers that are thousands of dollars. So no like gold-plated beer. So I am the senior technical evangelist for Adobe ColdFusion. I've been around for quite a long time, and as a member of the community, I've been doing Adobe ColdFusion evangelist work here for 4 years now. Coming up, actually, I think my 4-year anniversary is in just a few days, which is super awesome and fun. ColdFusion, it was my first language almost 30 years ago, and after that, I learned a bunch of other languages. And ColdFusion, obviously, still continues to be my favorite. And I'm not just saying that because I'm paid to, but also that. All right, let's jump in. What are we going to be talking about today? So what are all the topics? Just so if you're like, oh, all of these suck, I'm going to go play pickleball. We're going to start off with talking about lists, which are fairly unique in ColdFusion. If you're coming in today and you haven't done ColdFusion maybe, and you're like, what is this thing? You're going to see the way that it handles lists and maybe be a little confused or delighted or, I don't know, excited about it. We're going to talk a little bit about arrays, structs, and query objects. And by the way, all of those topics, we're just going to touch on them a tiny bit today. I'm doing a ColdFusion Foundations webinar series starting in July. So near the end of July, there's going to be a full 1-hour webinar on all of the different tools inside of ColdFusion for lists. The following month, all of the things for arrays. I think Summit might be in September, but then after that, structs and then queries. So I'm kind of getting down to the nitty gritty because there's a lot of stuff people have just missed, right? We would add language features and they'd get buried in the tech notes. And then I would see people's code and wonder, why aren't you using this particular tool? It's in there. And they'd be surprised because they haven't seen it. So I really want to dig deep and and that's kind of for everyone. Even if you've been programming for a long time, sometimes we don't do the work to go back in to check and see, like, oh, was there some new cool, like, manipulation or feature that was added for a particular type of data structure. And for me, continuous learning is really, really key. So we're going to talk about playing with JSON a little bit. I'm going to show you a fun little trick on how to drop a query return of any size, no matter what the column names, no matter how many columns there are, directly into a displayed table on your screen. Kind of potentially a replacement for CF Grid, but very, very simple. It's like just a few lines of JavaScript and maybe a couple lines of ColdFusion. It's actually really, really easy and nice and very useful because the table is searchable, paginated, and sortable right out of the box. So a nice little tool. And of course, you can very easily style it as well. I'm going to talk about null support. So this is something that actually a lot of programmers that I've spoken with don't really understand really well. And we're going to dive in a little bit about how ColdFusion looks at nulls. I'm going to talk about enhancing the performance of your servers using the max template setting inside of admin. And I know this is like, I'm throwing darts, right? Like this is so random, but that's the fun part of this. This is a buffet. You're just picking out some tasty looking stuff and putting it on your plate. And hopefully it'll get you excited to go back for more later. I'm going to talk about a simple responsive front end using ColdFusion and HTMX. I've done this before. This is a way simplified version of it. Like you can grab this and build your own SPA, like out of the box, super, super fast. You can also use this to progressively enhance just some parts of your site. You don't have to take the whole thing over, and you don't have to learn a brand new framework or language. And I think that's a really important part of this. You can actually leverage your ColdFusion knowledge and experience and still create reactive, responsive, asynchronous websites for your users to use. I'm going to show you how to build a simple IDE to read and edit files using ColdFusion, and that's kind of fun. And then the final one, I'm going to end on a bang. I'm going to show you how to run Python inside of your CF, like not alongside, actually inside. And again, all this code is going to be available. You'll be able to play with it later. It'll be lots of fun. Let's dive in. All right, lists. Now, lists in ColdFusion are first-class citizens. So in a lot of languages, they're not. They consider them to just be strings. They're not necessarily iterable, depending on what language you're in. But in CF, lists have special properties and a lot of functions designed to help you deal with them. In fact, 27. There's 27 functions specifically designed to alter, add to, delete, check, search, do all the different things that you need to lists. In addition, lists also are string. They're still strings. So all of the different functions that apply to strings actually also apply to lists as well. So they're a really powerful object inside of ColdFusion and somewhat underrepresented, I think. I think they get a bad rap because people use them the wrong way a lot of times. Speaking of the wrong way to use them, you can actually create really high complexity objects by using multi-dimensional lists, so lists of lists. I don't necessarily recommend you do that. I have 100% been guilty of doing that because it's just really easy. You do run into potential issues with performance, but also things like your delimiters getting in the way. It can get a little bit funky and freaky. However, I absolutely have had a lot of fun with just using them in a very temporary, like on the way to something else. It's really powerful to have these things available for lists. You're almost always better off converting a list to an array, though. Arrays just have a little bit more power in them. However, we're still going to show you, because we're a little unhinged today, so we're going to go in and talk about some list stuff. So we're gonna talk about three things, just three. We're going to look at list get at, list find no case, and list rest. And then as a bonus, we're just going to show you a little bit about list to array. So let me pop right into the code. And actually, I can just show you all the code here because it's all in there. All right, so list get at. I'm assuming list get at is something that you probably all have seen or used. And essentially what it does is if you are searching for a particular item inside of lists, you can actually figure out which index it's at by passing in that item to list get at. So as you can see, I've got a list here. The delimiter is comma, which is very common. No pun intended, comma, common. Anyway, sorry. And then we're going to say list get at list. And we're going to get, opposite way. I'm actually looking for the index. I swear I practiced this, right? So I'm going to say what is actually in the position 2. Now, very important for those people that are new to ColdFusion, a lot of our indexes, in fact, I would venture to say most of them, if not all of them, start at 1. So arrays don't start at 0, they start at 1. List index position start at 1. And the story I've been told, and we talked about this a little bit on Monday with Brian's talk, was that originally when ColdFusion was designed, it was really designed not necessarily for hardcore programmers, but for people who were just technically adept, but didn't really know programming stuff. And if you were to take 5 buckets and put them in front of somebody and ask what the first one was, they would call it bucket 1, not bucket 0. And so that was sort of the thinking there. Of course, pretty much every other language went a different way. So, hey, I guess we're special and unique and awesome. But that's why when I look at position 2, the output is going to be green, which is the index at position 2. Going the other way, list find no case. So if you want to find which index position inside of a list a particular item is, and you don't care about case, so there is also a list find, in which case the case matters. But in this case, it doesn't. I'm going to look for banana. So I'm going to put in the name of the list. I'm going to put in banana. Note the lowercase b. The list actually has an uppercase b, and it's going to throw back position 2. Again, index start at 1. So in position 2 is that. So you could use this to kind of go back and forth, figure out which index something is at, and then go and grab that. And then the last one, this is one that I don't know a lot of people have actually heard about this. I learned about it fairly recently. List rest. So list rest returns back the list except for the very first position, except for the first index. So it's essentially a slice of the first position out of your index and then returning back the rest of it. It's an interesting thing. I could definitely see this if the first position in your list is a title or a column name, for example. This is actually useful for that because you don't have to, kind of go around and just do a remove or a list delete at position 1. You can just drop it in there and it'll do its thing. Awesome. All right. Next. And apologies for kind of going a little bit fast because, again, I've got a lot. So that's one. Arrays. Now, everybody here, I'm sure, plays with arrays quite a bit. Arrays are kind of the thing that we do, right? And the number of different built-in functions in ColdFusion actually reflects that. There's 38 functions in ColdFusion that are built in for handling them. And then, again, there's one for converting from lists to arrays, which was, I guess I just skipped it in the last one. You know what? Hold on. I did skip that. Let me show you that. Oh, it's not in here. Huh. I suck. Why did I do that? Sorry. I'll show it to you later. All right. 1 second. All right. So we're just going to focus on a few again. In August of this year, I'm going to have an entire 1-hour talk on all 38, goodness help me, built-in functions and what they do and how they're useful, and have demo code for all of that. So I will definitely be burning through all of my tokens on Cursor for that. Kidding, maybe not so much. These are, by the way, all these are available both headless as well as member functions. So that's just something to keep in mind. And today I'm going to be looking at 5, so quite a bit more than lists. I'm going to look at array append, array clear, array contains no case, array delete at, and an array delete no case. And again, these are things that I think probably a lot of folks may know about, but maybe not. And again, I'm often surprised at just people not realizing that they can do things like an array append, for example. right? So here we go. I'm going to create an array, red and green, but we're missing blue, right? It's got to be RGB, right? Like that's the OG, the RGB. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to put in the name of the array, and I'm going to go ahead and say array append blue to that. And then when I dump it, boom, position 3, now we have another position in the array. Cool, awesome. Now, a lot of times arrays are used in sort of a transitory manner, right? So you may need to use something in an array and then throw it out at the end of, let's say, a loop, right? So you may build an array, use it to do a bunch of things, and then you want to throw it out. And there's a number of ways to do that. You could delete the array, you could completely destroy it, but that's actually programmatically very expensive, right, to do that, because you'd have to then reinstantiate it, and that if you're doing millions of iterations, that can be actually really expensive. So all you have to do, array clear, will just destroy the data inside of it while maintaining the structure. And you can see that here. Create this, I dump it first, I run array clear, and it's gone. So kind of a useful tool. That's one that actually people don't know about. It's very strange to me that one came up in a few things. Okay, array contains no case. So this is just checking for the existence of a particular item in an array, right? It's not getting the index or anything like that. We're just seeing if an array has this particular thing in it. So I create an array, Alice, Bob, and Charlie, and you'll notice the no case. So in the original array, Charlie has an uppercase C. But when I test for it, I'm testing lowercase, and this is gonna throw back a Boolean. Now, another fun thing for folks not familiar with ColdFusion is we have a lot of different Booleans. We are just rife with Booleans. So this is actually returning yes, which is the same as 1, which is the same as true. So it's just going to throw yes back at us because Charlie is found in there. With the lowercase b, because we're doing array contains no case. All right. Well, thanks, Robin. Yeah, no, this is fun. Again, continuous learning, even stuff that like you knew before. It's good to kind of get a reminder. And by the way, those talks are going to be super fun. The function talks, because we're going to have a blast with it. I've already got tons of ideas on themes, and it'll be a good time. Array delete at. So if you need to get rid of something in the middle of an array, right? You can go out and figure out, okay, I need to get rid of this particular item. So we've got an array 1, 2, 3, and confusingly, we want to get rid of 1, which is in position 1. So we're going to say array delete at data position 1, and now 2 is at position 1, and 3 is at position 2. So sorry about that. Confusing, I know. Apologies. But there you go. So that's a really easy way to get rid of it. Now, again, it doesn't create a blank or empty array position. It will actually shift the array up. Now, let's say you actually want to delete a value inside of an array, not a position. So maybe you don't know the index of it. You can use array delete or array delete no case. Again, we've got a lowercase b. I'm going to pass in an uppercase b into array delete no case. And you can see the position 2 shifts up. Now 2 is C. Everything gets done right. So pretty easy, pretty fun. This does get a little bit harder as we go along. So let's talk about structs. So structs are something that they do exist in other languages, but sometimes they're called something else. This is not a hurricane, by the way, just to be clear, I swear. So what is a struct in ColdFusion? They're key value pairs. They're used to store and organize your data, and they can be extremely complex, and they're very powerful. They're flexible. And we're going to talk about a few different things. And now we're getting into things where you may have not even heard that this was added to ColdFusion. Some of these were added fairly recently. Struct key exists, obviously, has been around, I mean, forever. I know it's a favorite of a lot of people for looking into and trying to find stuff. But we're also going to talk about struct filter, struct map, and struct reduce, right? So who here didn't realize that those even existed in ColdFusion? Like, I know there's going to be hands up because I know there's people that don't be embarrassed. It's okay, because we're going to learn about them. There you go, Steve. Steve had not heard of him, and that's actually, honestly, Steve, it's totally common. Like I get people back, people especially who are not like, who didn't start their ColdFusion careers as like modern JavaScript developers. They just don't even, I don't know, they don't look for it necessarily. But these are powerful and useful and kind of awesome things. So let's take a look and see what you can do with them. So starting off with the one that all of us, I think, probably use and love, struct key exists. So creating a struct, I'm going to look for whether a user role exists, and if it does, I'm going to write the output out. So this is useful for defensive programming, right? Making sure that you're not exposing exception errors. I've seen, JCS, I've seen some be available only in script and not in tags. Is this still the case? That's a really good question, JC. So that may be the case, that they're not in tags. I sort of have gone away from doing programmatic and like logic programming in tags. It's been a minute since I've done very much of that. So I just, this feels a lot more. I've done a lot more coding out of tags than in tags at this point in my career. So it's something I can check into and see. But you may be right. Those types of like map, reduce, filter may not actually be available in tags right now. So I can take a look at that. If you could you throw that in the Q&A for me, and that way I can remember later to look it up. So let's go into struct filter. So what does struct filter do? All right, so struct filter returns items. So you pass in the struct, and then you pass in a callback, which in this case is a function. And it's going to return the items in the struct that actually match or fall into whatever your function is. So here I've got a struct with apples, bananas, and oranges, and we're going to call this an inventory, right? So let's say there's 10 apples, there's 5 oranges, but hey, we have no bananas. Please laugh. No. Anyway, and so we're going to go ahead and say we're going to struct filter inventory, and the function is return any value over 0. That's it, right? And when that comes back, it's going to return back a struct with just the things that existed in that particular function. So instead of creating a new one, looping through it, doing all that, this is it's much easier. Now, to be clear, this stuff absolutely was possible to do programmatically in a much more complex way prior to these being added, the same way that it was available in JavaScript too. This is just an easier and more readable way of doing things. It's just kind of better. It just feels better. It looks better. All right. So map. Map is an interesting one. Map's kind of fun. So what map does is it runs your callback, your function, against every single item inside of your struct, depending on what you're looking to do to it, right? But it has the opportunity. You just have to choose which things you want to modify. So it applies the function to all the items. So here I've got some prices. So let's say I run a stationery store. Those are the prices. Pens $1.50. Notebooks are $3. Erasers are $1.05. Why 5 cents? I don't know what's going on there. But let's say there's a 10% tax I want to throw back. I want to display on the screen. I want to put a dollar sign in front of it first of all. I want the names to be uppercase, and I want to throw it back as 1 point times 1.1. Oh, you know what? Am I missing did I not put ucase in there? Sorry, I put, it's supposed to be ucase times the value. So as you can see, it comes back, and now it's a dollar, whatever, it's $3.30. Now, what I probably should have done here is actually converted the integer to money or some other like to, decimal. I should have floored it, right? But as you can see, it actually ran through and did everything on every single one and then returns back the individual ones. And that's important because the next one, struct reduce, this one actually collapses all of the items down. So it runs something against all of them, and you can use it to do like concatenation. You can use it to do sums. So here we've got your kid's grades came back, and you want to find out what the total numbers were, right? And so, they got a 90 in math, an 85 in English, 95 in science, smart kid. So I'm going to say struct reduce grades, and then I want the accumulation plus the value. So this is kind of like a value plus plus, and then return it back. And there you go. So the total is 270. That's the total number of the value, not the key here, and throw it out. So again, these are useful for very specific things, right? But when you need them, you need them. So there you go. Okay, let's keep going. What comes after structs? Queries. All right. Queries. So queries are interesting. Queries are rather unique in ColdFusion, and they're not what a lot of people think they are, including me. So I used to believe that they were an array of structs. They're not, actually. They sure do look like them, but actually they're a special instance of something called ColdFusion.SQL.QueryTable, which, as you could probably guess, is related to databases, right? So it's a structure that is sort of tied in and around what might be returned back from like a SQL query or a SQL statement that's coming back, right? Now, because they're a special instance, you can do things to them that you couldn't do if they were just an array of structs, right? You can, and I'm going to show you 4 things here, but in addition to this, you can do things like a query of queries against them. You can get the count, like the record count of them. Like it treats it as, even if you're not getting it back from a SQL statement, as long as it's a query object, you can do these things to them. So we're going to look at some of the same stuff that we just looked at in structs. So query filter, query map, and query reduce, and then something else that you may or may not have heard of, query sort. All right. Everybody having fun? Hopefully, I'm having fun. Query filter. So this one's fun. And by the way, when I look at people's code, because I look at a lot of people's code, I don't know that I have ever seen any one of these things used until recently. I did see this used in some code very recently, but it's like literally been in the last month. So what is query filter? In short, it's essentially a shorthand query of queries. That's all. So what you're doing is you're putting the query in, and you're putting a callback against that query, and you're going to get a query in response. So if you need to continue filtering down or doing other things to this continues to be a query object. So we're not translating this or transposing this into a different type of data structure. It is still a query. So here we've got, and I've created a query in memory. You don't have to see it. It's fine. It's basically high scores on a video game. We've got Alice, Bob, Diana, Ethan, George, and I want to get a query back of everyone who got more than 80 points in their high score. And I'm just going to go ahead and dump it. As you can see, it's still a query object. Very, very simple, very easy, very nice. A little bit easier to read than a query of queries. Now, I'm sure someone's going to ask me a question, and I think it's going to be Steve. Is this more performant than a query of queries? I don't know. I need to ask that. But if that was the question you were going to ask, please put it in the Q&A. Because I do have to ask the engineers exactly how this works behind the scenes. I'm actually assuming they're doing a Q of Q in the background. That is what I'm assuming, that this is just a shorthand way of doing a Q of Q, but I'm not absolutely 100% sure necessarily. I will say in just the very tiny bit of testing that I've done, this is super fast. So I don't know, maybe someone with a lot of time on their hands might want to do some testing for me on this. I don't know. That would be amazing. But let's move on. Okay, query map. Just like in the struct. And by the way, there's array map too. Like there's maps for almost everything. There's not a list map, but so just like struct map, query map basically takes your query return and allows you to run something against the data that's in it. Okay. So in this case, we're looking at the scores, and by the way, you can see the people who didn't quite cut the mustard in the previous one, the people that were under 8. So I'm going to map, and on the returns, I'm going to upcase the names, and I'm going to multiply their scores. I'm going to divide their scores by 100. Let's say I wanted to do like a statistical analysis, and I needed to normalize between 0 and 1, right? And I wanted to sort of map that. So this is a very, very, very easy way of doing that, right? Like it's just a couple lines of code. Very simple, very easy to read, very to understand. Steve H says, is it fair to say that these functions aren't commonly used because it can be done via SQL on the database side before it returns to the app server? Yes and no, Steve. So that is one way of looking at it. But remember, if it's being done on the database, what's the slowest part of your workload? It's always the DB, right? If you are making DB calls and forcing the database to be doing the work, you are potentially setting yourself up for performance issues down the road. You always want to minimize the number of times that you hit your DB. Like that query of queries is like 10,000 times faster than an actual query to your SQL, depending on the database and all that, right? So yes, I think some people default to it, and what I have seen a lot is people have a comfort with SQL. You've just been doing it for so long. That's me, right? It took me forever to get into like vector databases and things that weren't like NoSQL stuff, because I had a comfort. Like I knew what joins were. Like I could do all sorts of really fun stuff, and ColdFusion made that super easy to do, either in SQL in ColdFusion or just consuming stored procedures. So potentially, but I think the one that is debatable, I think it's best to leave complex queries to DBs, but reduce the number of calls to it. Yes, that's a good point, JC. So that's a good way of thinking about it too. It's really the calls that are made. I mean, you definitely don't want to bring down the whole DB and then filter at the end of the day, right? That's bad code. That's bad architecture. But you also don't want to sit there and like keep hitting it with very tiny changes, right? Like that's setting yourself up for failure as well. All right. So just like in arrays, query reduce is going to take the return back. So I had a query up there. This is a different query that had prices for things. And I just wanted to figure out, let's say this is it's returning back a receipt for someone, and I want to do a total. So what I do is I collapse down the row price and I add it to the accumulation, and I throw a $sign in front of it, and there you go, 1774. You'll just have to trust me that that's the amount that's in there. Now this one's fun. So this is another one that you don't see a lot. Because oftentimes if you have a query and you need to resort it in a different way, what are you going to do? You're going to do a query of queries, and you're going to add order by, right? I mean, that's what I do. That's what I've always done, right? But there is actually a tool for it called query sort, where you put the query in, and then you add a function that's going to change the way that that it's sorted. And it's a little bit confusing here because it's using compare, row 2 score versus row 1 score. And that kind of like that changes the way that it goes, whether it's descending or ascending. It took me a minute to sort of get that, although it was about 1 a.m. when I wrote this code. So it might be easier for you to understand, but here you go. So this is all the scores inside of the game from highest score to lowest score. So someone got a 95, really awesome. Charlie needs to work on his video gaming skills, clearly. And I'm not talking our Charlie. This is some other random Charlie that we don't know. Okay. Play with JSON. Who here has heard of JSON? Like, I really hope you all know JSON. So JSON is ubiquitous. I kind of dislike that word these days because it is also ubiquitous to say ubiquitous, but it is everywhere. He's the scary guy in the horror movies. I was gonna put in a. You're funny, Steve. Wait, great minds think alike. I was thinking of putting in like a nightmare or not nightmare. What's the Jason Halloween? Friday the 13th. There you go. Sorry, there's so many horror movies. So JSON is everywhere. It's a text-based format for structured data exchange. That just means it's a form of data structure. Every API out there uses it. GraphQL is essentially designed around the concept of JSON, right? The structure and shape of your query, which is essentially a type of JSON, ends up with a JSON return, right? So that it's a way of thinking that modern developers have sort of just kind of fallen into. And of course, because of that, we've got a lot of tools for seamlessly converting between CFML data types and JSON. Not as many as some of the other ones, mostly because JSON is a fairly simple thing to go back and forth on. So I'm just going to show a few of them. Serialized JSON, deserialized JSON, is JSON, and we're going to talk about that. That one's actually really critical, and one, again, that I don't see enough, and I'll talk about why that's important. And then we'll talk a little bit about like pulling data back from it and the easiest ways to go ahead and do that. So, boop. JSON, we're about halfway through. And I have 20 minutes. Okay, Mark, talk faster. Okay, serialized JSON. We have all seen this, I'm sure. Like we're all using serialized JSON. We've got we've got the data up there. We're going to serialize it, and then we're going to output it to the screen, and there you go, right? And you can see this is actually it's got multiple depths and dimensions and stuff. And ColdFusion, this is, you don't even need to see that. That's easy. Deserializing, so pulling something back into a ColdFusion context from JSON. So we can easily pull it into a struct, and this is what we're going to use later to sort of pull stuff back out of JSON. Very easy. You've got Mark, role admin, because I'm the admin. Gosh darn it. We run deserialize, and boom, we've got a struct. Okay, the one that I actually wanted to spend time and talk about is JSON. So a lot of us, unfortunately, need to deal with third-party vendor, outside vendor APIs. It's just a thing that is a reality of what we have to deal with every day, right? Like we can't provide all our own data. That's just, and with things like AI, it gets more and more in this vein. The problem is too often we allow errors that come back through the systems to either get all the way back to our users or penetrate deep enough into our systems where the errors that end up getting thrown are so far from the point of ingress that it makes debugging really difficult. Okay, it doesn't have to be. And it's literally, it's one built-in function. It's there. Like if more people actually ran is JSON. So is JSON just says whether JSON is valid or not, right? Because I'll tell you why it happens. So sometimes things like timeouts, that's very common, right? Somebody's API gets really popular, to start timing out, and then the error can come back from anywhere in that stack outside of your call, right? It could be at their web server, it could be at their application server, it could be anywhere, and you don't know what that error is going to necessarily look like, but I can pretty much guarantee you it won't be JSON. It'll probably be some kind of 404 or whatever. And unfortunately, what will happen is sometimes those errors will get through that initial point until you're actually trying to either serialize it or deserialize it or loop through it or do whatever you're going to do to it. And then all of a sudden, like, boom, it blows up and you get this weird error like, open bracket quote is not valid JSON. And you're like, what the heck is that? Right. And now it's happened to me long enough to, for me to know, like, oh, all right, somebody's not testing for the JSON being valid. But if you learned anything today, it's if you are taking in JSON, please test to make sure that it's valid before using it. Okay. So, and then extracting, displaying JSON data. So this is fairly easy. The easiest way that I've just found is just to serialize it, throw it into a structure, and just do an array each on it, and pull it back. I mean, that's just the easiest. That's just the easiest way. So anyway, or a struct, like whatever you're going to use to loop it, CF loop, whatever you want. It's easiest to sort of do that versus like trying to like loop through it in its raw format. Now, if you're on JavaScript, that's different. I'm talking about SSR stuff. All right. Boop. All right. Now it's time to get unhinged and fun. Dropping a query return of any size column names directly into a table. So we're going to leverage something called return type in query execute. And some of you may have seen something like this before. I've sort of played with this for many years, and I use this a ton, right? Anytime that I'm actually displaying tabular data, it is so much easier to just do something like this rather than try to loop and like start table, okay, inner loop, tr, okay, inner loop, like blah. That's such a pain in the butt. That's like 1998 programming. So here I'm just going to show you really easily how to tie into a particular thing, which is Grid.js. So Grid.js is a free open source thing you can use. It's very basic. I pick it because it's a very easy and basic thing to deal with. Some people like data tables. I feel like every time I try to use data tables, more hair on my head goes gray. Oh, wait. It's all gone. But yeah, I just, my blood pressure goes up. Like I just have not had fun recently. I think they over-engineered it. They wanted it to do everything for everyone. Grid.js is just basic. It's simple. It has a lot of functionality, and it's useful. It's pretty fast. I like it. But use what you're going to do, because a lot of different things will accept endpoints. And that's what we want to do. We want to like server-side render whatever we're throwing to this so that it allows us to do any sort of filtering or programmatic stuff on that side and return back what we want to the user. And some of you may know about CF Grid. CF Grid was okay when it came out. Unfortunately, it's less okay now. It's kind of broken, honestly. Sorry. And we've been talking internally about how to fix that. But it's the ongoing argument about, putting in front end stuff for people who may or may not want to use it. I think it's easier for us just to make it easy to use any front end framework that you want to use. I think that's probably the winning solution. But potentially, you may see some movement in here in the future. I don't know. We'll see. And okay, and by the way, if you use a struct as your return, they're not ordered. And there is an ER for this. This is something that came out of one of my talks in Washington, D.C. Oh, Kevin. What happened? CF Grid. Okay. You're funny. Funny guy. All right. So this is what it's going to end up looking like. I just wanted to show you that first, just to get you excited about what could possibly be. So this is raw. This is what CF Grid looks like with no styling templates, like nothing else added to it, and it's pretty good. It looks fairly modern. Now you can pass in things. You can say like how many total items you want before it paginates. But you can see there's a pagination thing here. I obviously only have 3 things, so it's not going to paginate. But if I want to sort, that's built in. If I want to search this, it's built in, like with no additional extra programming on my part. It's really nice. Now I will say, if you want to use this in Dave, hush, Dave. If you want to use this in production, do think about how much you want to return on each return, right? So there's arguments to be made on doing filtering on the client side because it's faster. versus returning back so much that, you know, the initial hit is high, or going back and actually searching for stuff using ColdFusion to pull back stuff. There's arguments to be had either way, but let me pop in to return type. Okay, so here is what that page looks like. And apologies, there's JavaScript. Sorry, there is JavaScript in here, and but it's fairly easy. So I'm going to show you the JavaScript first, and then I'll show you what the ColdFusion looks like. So I'm using fetch to go and grab my endpoint, which is just it's a fake get users thing, right? That's going to return back some data. And then I go through here. By the way, this code will all be available for you to pull back. So I convert it to JSON. I go through, I just test and make sure that's not 0, right? So you don't get an exception error. If it is, I just display no data. And then what I'm doing, this is kind of the tricky part, this is the fun part, is I'm actually using the keys to generate the column names, right? And that means that no matter how many column names I have, whatever the size and shape of the thing that I return back, it's going to just expand or contract the table, which is nice. That means that you could use this tool kind of anywhere in your stack without having to customize it for your particular thing. It's easier for down the road if you have to like change it around. Then I instantiate grid.js here and set the column to the dynamic columns that I set to, and set the data to rows. And then I go ahead and drop it into this blank div here called user grid. This is all very normal and probably something that a lot of you have seen in things like data tables, right? Okay, then let me pop up to this is the CFC that I wrote real quick. And so I simulate a query here, right? But this probably, like, so this and this would probably be all one query, but I needed to do an actual query. So I'm doing a Q of Q, basically, and I'm setting the return type to array, and that is what gets returned back to that endpoint, converted to JSON. Boom, Bob's your uncle, and you've got a very, very pretty table. Awesome. There you go. Okay. I have 15 minutes left. Yeah, Luke. Yeah, so I used to do that too. I used to spin up my own grids. I used to kind of do my own thing and bind and do all that. But eventually, it's fun. Why does it have to be a query if you're returning an array? Chris G says. Well, because in this case, I was trying to simulate that you would be getting stuff from a database. That's why. So it's a little bit of like, don't look at the man behind the curtain stuff. That's why I was doing that. So usually what you would do is you do a CF query, and then the return type would be array instead of a query object. That's the difference there. Can I open up the debugger so we can see the call and return data? Maybe. So what do you want to, oops, wait a minute. So what did you want to see, Steve? You want to see this? Is that what you wanted? Yeah, okay, there you go. Yep. So there you go. And you could do things like uppercase the first letter of it and stuff. I mean, there's other things you can kind of play with. Yeah, if you're getting all caps for the keys, it's probably because you're returning as a struct. I returned as an array. Okay, sorry. So JC says, when you return as array, how are complex fields like JSON and geography treated by CF Grid? That's a great question, JC. Actually, that one I don't know. Yeah, this is and again, this is really for simple stuff. Like at a certain complexity level, you're just gonna have to like pull your sleeves up and do the hard work. This is more for like, you've got a user list, or just the basics that a lot of us spend 80% of our time sort of slogging through. This is an easy way to just kind of like throw it out there and have a reusable component that just does it all for you. But form grid, rich text editor, and chart and super mode. I miss the days when you could do almost all in CF tags versus the plugins. Yeah, Phil, no, I agree. And there's a lot of people like that. And this is why this is an ongoing conversation actually internally, because I know there's people that prefer to have it all built in. I tend to kind of fall into that too. I sort of reluctantly go out and use plugins. I try to use as little plugin as possible because long term, it just means more updates and more maintenance on your side. You have to maintain a list of all the plugins that you have, make sure that they're continuing to be secure, all of that. It's kind of a pain. But anywho, okay. Cool. Up next, null. So what is null? And I love how I'm bouncing around. I feel like I'm just totally feral here, like going from like, hey, front end stuff to what is null? Like what is life? What is anything? What is existence? So this is something that is so incredibly hard to actually explain to people. Null is a meatless dinner. Yes, Steve nailed it. Null is a meatless dinner. Null is the absence of meat in your dinner, clearly. Null is the absence of a value or object reference. So this is really hard because null is not empty. Like an empty string is not null. Those two are not programmatically the same thing. They're not zero, and it's not undefined either. Null is the existence of nothing, but it exists. And that is fun. Now, I will not skip the Python. I will go as long as people are going to hang out. So, by the way, this is being recorded. So if you miss anything at the end because you need to go jet skiing, that's cool. But this will be recorded so you can jump back in. But don't worry, because there's nobody coming in after me. So as long as you want to stick around, we good. So in 2018, which seems like not that long ago, but don't look at the date because it was actually a long time ago, we introduced optionally null support into ColdFusion. And prior to that, we didn't have it. It's in the admin. We also added the ability to test is null and to set a value to null explicitly. Prior to that, like if somehow null got into the system, it would have been converted to an empty string, which obviously is not. It's not the same thing, right? But they needed to do something. I'm not sure. It's probably the best they could do at that point. But if you turn off null right now and you try to set a value to null, it's going to cause an exception because CF thinks it's a non-instantiated variable. I'm actually going to show you that in a second. But something important to realize and know, and this is one thing that actually gets people sometimes. If you're using struct key exists to see if something exists, null returns true, which surprises a lot of folks, right? Because null's nothing, right? Does it exist? Does nothing exist, right? But yes, it is the existence of nothing, so therefore it exists. So if you're using struct key exists and you want null to actually return back as false, you actually have to test for that. So anyway, let's. I'm going to go ahead and just show you real quick here. So first of all, oh wait, hold on. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain here. Yes. I know. LastPass. Okay, we're good. All right. So where do you set null out of the box? And by the way, again, just to be clear, today, if you install ColdFusion 2025. Null will be turned off by default unless you turn it on. So that's still a thing today. And whenever I suggest that we change that, people throw tomatoes at me for some reason. But here it is in server settings, enable, what the heck? Enable null support and submit changes. All right, so null. There we go. Okay, so very, very easy, is null. So I'm setting val to null explicitly there. I'm testing is null. It's going to return true because it is null. So there you go. And again, I'm setting the value of user.age to null, and I return back the struct. And as you can see, it's showing null in brackets to identify it as the value null, not the string null. And then here, struct key exists, returns yes for null. Now, what happens if I break my ColdFusion and have to reinstall it and don't go back in and set this up? Well, I get an exception error. And as you can see here, because I'm trying to set it to null, it doesn't understand that null is null. It thinks that it's a variable name and it hasn't been instantiated, so it's undefined. So it's actually funny that null is undefined. That's got to be a joke somewhere. I want that T-shirt. Null is undefined. Anyway, okay. Moving along. Let me set this back so that I don't short circuit myself later. There we go. Okay. Awesome. Next up, template cache. Okay, we're almost at the end, by the way, folks. So hang on. Steve H says, can you initialize a variable without a value and it will take on null by default if it's enabled? Yes, I think it. Oh, that's a really good question. I think it does instantiate as null. I should know that. Darn it, Steve. Let me test that. Maybe if there's time at the end, I'll test that. Otherwise, I'll test and email you. Okay, template cache. So tuning ColdFusion is often a dance of knobs and dials and switches. There's a lot of ways to tune CF. It is not necessarily my leisure domain, but it's something I've had to do sort of because I've been doing this for so long. People just end up asking you how to do things. So this one particular thing I ran into, and it's something that no one seems to change. No one seems to have heard of it. And it can make an enormous difference in the way that your ColdFusion server performs. I'm going to tell a story, and apologies for it being kind of long, but it's fun. So a while back, prior to me coming here to Adobe, I was hired by a university because they had a massive critical failure of one of their applications, and ColdFusion was being blamed for it. Essentially, they were having like timeouts and crashes and things when a high load was put against it, and the powers that be were claiming ColdFusion was incapable of handling this type of load. It is terrible. We're going to remove it, blah, 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 right? So I'm having beers with the director of that program at one point, and he's telling me this story. He's trying to figure out what to do. And I said, well, just hire me. I'll prove it's not ColdFusion. And he's like, well, you haven't seen my code yet. Like, how do you know it's not ColdFusion? I'm like, because I know. I've been doing this long enough. I can tell you for sure. I've seen ColdFusion do stuff that would absolutely like blow your mind, right? Like you guys have a high load, but it's not that high. I'm fairly certain. So he's like, okay. Like I'll stake my reputation on it. So I get hired. I come in and I go in there and I start looking at this stuff, and they're actually doing load testing at this point, right? So I'm looking at their code, and it wasn't great necessarily, but there were a few places where they were using like get metadata on a couple things, which they didn't need to do anymore because this was prior to JSON maintaining things like types, right? So they didn't need to do that anymore. So we removed a couple things, and that sped things up. But then I went in and I started looking at the template cache, and what do I see? Well, it was set to default. It was set to 25, which is the default that it comes into that. Now, what is that? What is that setting? So that setting means that when when simultaneous requests come into the server, you are limiting processing down to 25 of them. Every single other one gets put into a queue until those are done processing, and then they come out of the queue and they start to get processed, right? So only 25 at a time can go in, and that's limited by things like CPU, by memory, right? Now the problem comes in if you have too many in the queue, and the ones that are being processed are not being processed fast enough, and your timeout settings aren't long enough, you'll start to get crashes and things timing out, and people will start coming out of the queue, and bad things happen, right? And so this type of thing was potentially happening, but I knew enough to know the problem wasn't that ColdFusion wasn't processing it enough. It came down the road, because what's always the problem? I said this earlier, right? If is the Oracle in the room, and it was, so they were using Oracle, and I guaranteed them that it was Oracle that was causing the problem, which did not make me any friends on the Oracle team. Actually, they were very, very mad at me. But I said, I'll prove it to you. So we came into a testing session, and I said, give me access to your testing server. And I said, I'm gonna crank this to the nines. I'm gonna say 500, right? This is a strong server. This was a very powerful, I think it had like 12 CPUs or something. Like, this is a beast. And I set it up to 500. And I go, you guys, I'm just telling you, you're not going to like what happens, because I'm gonna destroy your database. And they said, yeah, sure, buddy. We know it's going to crash. So told the guy who had his little DDoS setup in AWS to release the hounds, hit it with everything you got, and it did. And immediately everything went down, right? The thing just blew up into little tiny pieces. And of course, the smug looks on the Oracle people's faces were great. And then I went over and I opened up a ColdFusion page, and it ran. And I said, it's not ColdFusion. CF is running just fine. Go check your servers. Go check your Oracle servers. Well, lo and behold, we had hit their servers so hard, they actually couldn't check it. They had to send someone physically to go and unplug their Oracle box. And they said when they tried to touch the outside, it was so hot, they weren't able to keep their hand on it for more than a few seconds. So long story short, like, this is a very powerful tool that can help you tune and tweak and do stuff, but be careful, because it's there for a reason, right? You don't just want to open the dam because you're going to destroy everything underneath the dam. It's there for you to tune so that it works well with the speed and bandwidth of the rest of your systems. And it's not just databases, it's things like file writing and reading, right? Like, there's a heck of a lot of stuff that is much slower than all the processing and programmatic stuff. There's a lot of stuff downstream of your ColdFusion server that if you were just to open up everything, you'll destroy them, right? Especially when things scale. So don't do that. Like, work with them and tune them. Make sure that you're working with your timeout settings as well, because those two things, they're in concert. The maximum number of template requests, there's no real good answer for that. What I ended up doing for them, 85 was actually their number. 85 simultaneous. We were able to, at that point, process, what was it? I think their target number was 1,000 simultaneous requests from this crazy DDoS system that this guy had on AWS without going down. So we were able to run through enough of them and get it sent to the other systems without taking down Oracle at about 75 or 85. It was somewhere in there, but it took some tuning. It took some tweaking. And basically, I just kind of kept bringing it down and down and down until we started seeing timeouts coming out of the actual ColdFusion side, in which case then we turned it back around and went the other way and brought it back up. But it's going to be different for everyone. So stress testing your stuff, super, super, super important. There's talks that I believe Dakota Klum from XByte has done on doing stress testing and performance testing of your stuff. Take a look at this. I'll try to find a link to that if I can. But that's figuring out how to do that with what's the name? J something. There's a toolkit that's a Java toolkit that allows you to basically programmatically hit your server with thousands and thousands. JMeter, thank you, Carl. JMeter, to go and actually hit your stuff and do that. Don't test in production, please. Like, go and really put your stuff under strain before you actually throw stuff out into the wild, because you might be surprised. There might be some stuff that's going to break, and it might be ColdFusion, but it might not be ColdFusion. It could be something else down the road. So yeah, go ahead and do that testing. Awesome. Okay. Oh, and let me show you super quick where that is, just because. Boop. So it is in server settings, request tuning, right here at the top. Maximum number of simultaneous template requests. As you can see, it's 25. That's the default. Then if you come down, here's your queue timeouts, right? So it'll time out after 60 seconds. So if you have so many things in the queue because you're only processing 25 at a time, that takes more than 60 seconds, you're actually going to have people timing out, and that's a bad experience for your users. So try not to do that. Awesome. Okay. Shoot, where are we? We're getting there. We're getting there. Oh shoot, I'm 5 over. Okay. I'm going to go through this real fast because I've actually shown this before. Responsive reactive front end for with JS for ColdFusion. How many of you have heard of HTMX or Hotwire? They kind of had their moment. So what these platforms allow you to do is to create responsive, reactive, asynchronous applications without having to write really any type of JavaScript in the front end. It allows you to leverage all your stuff in the back end. And I'm going to show you really, really, really quickly how that looks, and you're going to love it because it's super fun. I use this all the time. Okay, so here we go. This is a little site that I built out. Actually, let me show it to you real quick. So very simple. You've got some buttons. When you click those buttons, content comes in. What you'll notice is what's not happening is it's not doing a full page refresh. I'm loading content into a space in here. And by the way, this content is server-side rendered ColdFusion. These are .cfm templates. They're actually being rendered on the backside in CF. So how does that work? All right. Notice, by the way, there's not a ton of JavaScript in here. Actually, there's none. All that you have are these sort of interesting HX gets and HX targets. So what those do is when this button is clicked, instead of submitting something or whatever, it's going to do a GET request against page1.cfm, and I'll show you that. And I'm going to target DisplayPort, which is this little div right here. But I can target anything. If I don't have that target, by the way, it'll replace what's inside of the element that's clicked, which is not what we want in this case, but sometimes it might be. So what do those pages look like? Well, they're not CFM and they're very simple, but as you can see, it is actually rendering. I've got a CF output and we've got a time format date now that's in there, right? So this is actually like dynamic stuff, and it's amazing. So in very, very brief short, what HTMX does, it allows you to target any DOM object and replace the contents of that DOM object with the return from some other page. It's super powerful. It's very simple. It's one of those, it's like checkers, right? It's like Go. Kind of a simple, on the face of it, a simple game, but extremely complex and powerful if you start to get to know it. If you guys follow Ben Nadal, he's been playing with HTMX and is using it a ton. Loves it. He's got great articles on it. He'll talk your ear off if you want to chat with him about it. But anyway, so just moving along because I'm way over time. Sorry about that, everybody. Simple Homebrew IDE. I'm going to go really quickly over this one because this one's kind of like a silly ColdFusion trick. Real quick, if you go and use this code, please don't expose it externally. I don't want to get that phone call because this actually is allowing you to edit stuff on your server. But if you did want to use it, it could be used to edit stuff that's on a server where you can't put an IDE in, or you don't want to open up something in inside of Notepad. And this is actually just using Monaco, which is that's actually what's in VS Code. So real quick, IDE, boom, here we go. Okay, so what I have here, I've got a folder with a couple of files in it, and then I've got this editor down here. If I click on that, it's going to drop in the contents of that file, which is just the word demo. And then I'm going to type 1, 2, 3. So we're editing this file. Again, it's a .cfm file. And I'm going to hit save. and it's going to say saved successfully. Now, I didn't do any sort of like reset or refresh or anything like that, but then I can go to a different file here. If I go back and open this one, the 123 is still there. Cool. Let me just show you that code real quick. This one has a fair bit of JavaScript in it. Again, you can just sort of copy it, but this is using the Monaco editor from like I said, VS Code uses this. It's very powerful. There's lots and lots of things like themes. You can use this, by the way, if you wanted to create something that like you could edit something and then like preview it. Let's say you're teaching, maybe you're teaching like your kids how to program. You could write a little thing like this for them, and it could all be sort of in one place in like a sandbox, so they can't do anything silly. You're not using up your cloud stuff or whatever, but then you also don't have to have them like opening up a VS Code IDE and I don't know, editing your other stuff or cursor deleting all of your projects on your work machine. So as you can see here, I've got a little thing for loading a file, saving the file, and then I've got the not that. So these are the files that were edited. By the way, also, if you'll notice, I'm actually pulling those files using ColdFusion. I'm just using, stop that. I'm just using directory list, and I'm filtering for .cfm and .htm. You could also filter for CSS if you wanted to have an editor for there. Ooh, beer on me. Yoo-hoo. Sweet. Excellent. All right. Can't wait for Vegas. Okay. The point everyone has been waiting for. Loading Python and CF. Little polymath stuff. So you might ask why would we do this? And honestly, the answer is because we can. But there is actually a good reason. There's a good reason to actually try to run Python inside of CF. And that is because Python is used a lot by people who aren't necessarily programmers. They're used by programmers too, but they're used by data scientists, biologists, right? Mathematicians, people who are doing like AI stuff. Like that may be their language of choice, and they may be working alongside you. And I've seen so many companies like this. Market America is a great example of having like a Python team and a ColdFusion team that sit side by side, right? And the way that they share data is kind of difficult. They have to like open up APIs and pull stuff back and forth, and have to deal with authentication and all sorts of stuff, when theoretically they could just bring a Python dev over and say, hey, like I wrote this code and it does this thing, and I'm going to drop it into your stuff. Now, what I put here is actually pretty limited. This is sort of again, it's a silly ColdFusion trick, right? But it does work, and I'm going to show you, not only does the Python run and work inside of ColdFusion, they share scopes too. So it's not like you have to do any sort of like weird pass the ball over the fence stuff. Like they're just sort of working. Yeah, used heavily in GIS also. It's there too. Now, in here, numbers on performance, I don't have any necessarily. I am making an assumption that it's going to run a little bit slower than running it kind of raw on a Python server, just because it's running on the JVM. This is this got pulled over. This is an implementation of Python in Java, right? However, Java, of course, which ColdFusion runs on, does a really good job of scaling with hardware, right? But yeah, and Phil's exactly right. Python's great, but not for delivering high-end web application. Totally true. But those web applications might want to do a little bit of data sciencey stuff, right? There may be some stuff that you want to pull back from somewhere and pull it back there. And could you do it in ColdFusion? Yeah, you totally could, right? But if you have this person over here that's a Python dev, it might be kind of nice to leverage them, like build your team. Like polymath teams are great. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and just do the code first. And literally that is all the code. And I'm using a new ColdFusion 2025 feature here, which is very fun and very useful. Prior to CF25, you could bring in jars, but you would have to drop them in the lib folder in ColdFusion outside of the www root, and then you'd have to restart ColdFusion. It was kind of a pain in the rear end. A lot of people didn't have access to be able to like restart their ColdFusion, or they'd have to wait, and like it kind of sucked. So in 2025, you can just load stuff in. So you don't have to use the Java loader anymore. which is really nice. It's a really nice thing. So what I'm doing here, I'm using Jython 2.7.4. So I went and just grabbed the latest version of it, downloaded it. It's available. It's open source. And I'm setting the path to it. It's here in the lib folder. Boop, there it is. And you can see this is in my folder here in root. So then I'm going to go ahead and create object. And the method I'm using is the Python interpreter inside of Jython. So this is outside of scope of this, but Jython has a bunch of different methods and stuff that you can use. I pass in the jar path, which I set up here, and I'm creating a Java object. Okay, so this is a ColdFusion variable called myCFVar. Very, very creative, I know. And you notice it's mixed case. Hello from CFML. Now I'm gonna go into Python. And I'm going to go ahead and just pull that variable and set a Python variable, CF message, to the value of my CFR. So as you can see, it just comes right in, right? Like I don't have to expose it somewhere or read in from a text file or do whatever nonsense, right? Like I can just set it and just put it right in there. And then I'm going to execute. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to concatenate the message, this value, and I'm going to set it to upper, which is a Python member function. So I'm going to uppercase hello from CFML, and I'm going to concatenate it with the string Python power, and then I'm going to set result equal to that to string. So again, this is all mixed stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and output that, and that looks like that. Return from Python. Hello from CFML plus Python power. Ta-da! I know it's not that exciting. It's not that great, but honestly, it is pretty cool. It's a very cool thing to do. It's very easy to do. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of potential here to really do some like polymath programming. And that is a thing that ColdFusion is good at, right? Like we have tags, we've got CF script, we have Java, right? Why not add Python? Like throw it in there. Anyway, that's all the time I have, and I'm so sorry I went like 15 minutes over. Thank you all for coming. If you guys have any more questions, I have some questions in the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and email back answers to later. But if any of you have any questions, please go ahead and email me. My email is takata@adobe.com. The content of this is going to be in github.com/Adobe ColdFusion. I think it's going to be under conferences, Dev Week 2025. It should be in there today. So I'll go ahead and push that up there. Again, you guys have been awesome, and make sure you keep coming all week. We've got many more things, many more talks, lots and lots of new stuff to learn. Anyway, that's it. Boom, drop mic. I can't drop the mic. It's mounted to my desk, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the silly